Hello, and welcome to this short tutorial on variables in Kotlin. For this tutorial, we'll be looking at mutable variables and immutable variables. So let's begin. For this tutorial, we'll use a Scratch file. A Scratch file is a sandbox where you can test your ideas before actually making use of them in your application. To create a Scratch file, simply go to IntelliJ and right-click New, Scratch File. We're going to select Kotlin for this, and that's it. As simple as that. Before we begin, let's talk a little bit about variables. So what exactly are variables? Variables are places where we store information for later use in our code. In Kotlin, we have two types of variables: immutable variables and mutable variables. The difference between them is that variables that are immutable cannot be reassigned, while variables that are mutable can be reassigned a different value later on. Now, this may sound a little bit confusing, so let's just have a look at how that is done in order to understand it a little bit better. We'll start by making an immutable variable. You do that by simply typing val and then assigning a name to your variable, which I'm going to call my first variable, then an equal sign and a value, which I'm going to say is this is my first variable. IntelliJ will pick up our changes and will display val my first variable, which is the name we assign to our variable, and the type of the variable, which is string. However, we won't see what is actually stored within our variable until we make use of it. To make use of it, let's try and print it out. To do that, simply type sout and tab. This is a nifty IntelliJ shortcut to write println, which is a Java function to print out a line in your console. Once that's done, simply type the name of your variable, and you'll see that IntelliJ will automatically display whatever's stored inside your variable. In our case, that is, this is my first variable. But what happens if we want to change whatever's stored within our variable? To do that, we would have to actually assign a new value to our variable, which we can do by simply writing the name of our variable, an equal sign, and whatever we want to assign to it. In this case, IntelliJ is telling us that there's an error. You can see that by the red line underneath our variable name, and if we try to run this code, you'll see that we get an error message saying val cannot be reassigned. That is because this is an immutable variable. An immutable variable cannot change the value once the value is assigned to it. So once we assign the value on line 1 with this is my first variable as the value, we cannot change it later on. In order to do that, we would have to use a mutable variable. So let's delete this and try and make a mutable variable. In Kotlin, you write a mutable variable by writing var instead of val, and then the name of your variable, which we'll call my first mutable variable, and just as before, an equal sign and whatever value you want to assign to this. In IntelliJ, mutable variables are always represented with an underline under its variable name. This is to tell you that this is a mutable variable and the value can be reassigned at any time. Again, let's try and see what's inside this variable. We'll do that by simply typing sout, tab, and putting the name of our variable inside, and that will give us this nice little blue message saying this is my first mutable variable. Now let's try and reassign this variable to see that we can actually do that. We can do that in the same way that we did with our previous variable by writing the variable name, an equal sign, and whatever value we want to assign to it. This time around, we see that we can actually change our value. And therefore, we see that our mutable variables compared to our immutable variables can actually be reassigned. That's it for our tutorial on how to write variables in Kotlin. If you liked it, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so that you can follow our future videos.